Good to
Let's
go.
go. Okay, afternoon everyone, and welcome to the third in our series of talks for this year's Open House Festival. We've already had the pleasure of talking to Christian from Gundry and Ducker last week, and Johan and Margaret from Arkmongers yesterday. But before we get started with tonight's or this afternoon's chat, just a brief introduction. My name is Dean, and I'm joined by my colleague Christopher. Give us a wave, Chris.
Hello.
And together we are the team behind We Design Homes. We launched We Design Homes just over a year ago, and we designed a platform to help connect enthusiastic homeowners with some of the best architects from across the UK and Ireland. So if you're looking to refurbish, extend, or even build your new home, please get in touch with one of us and we'll see how we can help.
Thank you very much for that, Dean. I have the great pleasure of introducing you all to today's guest. We have something a little bit different for you today. It's a session I'm very much looking forward to. We've had a great deal of fun speaking with various architects, Dean just pointed out then in the last couple of weeks. But today we are joined by one of East London's most experienced makers, Constructive and Co. Founded by Dom. Give us a wave, Dom. Sam.
Hello.
And Tim. In 2010, Constructive and Co. take great pride in supporting design-led architects and enthusiastic homeowners, the best kind of homeowners, to design, create and fit beautiful, bespoke kitchens, cabinets and furniture. So welcome, guys. Lovely to have you along today.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Chris.
Hi, guys. You want to share your screen and then
Yes.
if anyone's got any questions, please use the Q&A section at the bottom, and I'm just about to open the chat. And then we'll see if we can weave those into the conversation. If not, we'll save 5-10 minutes at the end and raise some of those questions to Tom, Sam and Tim at the end. Thanks very much.
Okay, is that showing up for you now?
Not yet.
Thinking.
I told you there'd be one thing. Always one thing.
It's remarkable. We've got so used to this. As I said the other day, like 2.5 years of this kind of meeting, and there's always something that goes slightly wrong every time.
And if it does, we've got no idea how to fix it.
Yeah. You would have thought we'd get used to the awkward quietness, but not the case.
Just building the anticipation. Just trying to do something.
We'll get there.
The large image size is taking a while to.
Okay. Should we start?
Yeah, you guys crack on and the screen will catch up.
Start by expanding a bit on kind of who we are and kind of how we started and that kind of thing. I think, as you said, Chris, we formed Constructive in 2010, but we've been going individually as makers since probably early 2000s. I think a couple of us sort of changed careers to become cabinet makers, so it was definitely something which was a kind of an itch that we wanted to scratch, and so we came from fairly disparate kind of careers to cabinet making, and we initially got together through a workshop share. So we're out in Leighton in East London, and we found a workshop where we could get 6 kind of individual makers in to sort of share the space, which is a really nice kind of collaborative way of working. We all kind of were able to share kind of our experiences in the early days of sort of starting up in business, very much as sort of in sort of one person setup, 1 or 2 people. And then Constructive came about basically because Tim had come across a mega project. He had a client who had approached him with something which he felt was too big for him to approach alone, and they came to chat with Dom and I, and we talked about joining forces. So it felt like the perfect launch pad to actually kind of form something new. So we started Constructive specifically to kind of deal with that project and to be able to fully kind of service kind of the requirements. It was out in Norfolk, so it was something quite different for us, and it was also on a much bigger scale than we had done before. And from there, we sort of started Constructive and started kind of motoring along, kind of merrily making mistakes and learning as we went along. And that kind of is kind of where we've pulled along for the last, well, I think we're up to 12 years now. It's our 12th year of being Constructive. So,
Yeah.
So were you guys friends before you kind of knew of each other before you came together?
I think I met Dom at college. We went to the London College of Furniture down on Commercial Road in East London, where at that point you could still do courses which were very much hands-on, where you could learn hand making skills, but also machine skills as well. So it's a very kind of balanced course, and so it really gave us a really good grounding in all the sort of practical and technical side of cabinet making. Of course, what it didn't do was give us any kind of grounding in the business side or kind of, how to market ourselves, all that kind of stuff. So that was all stuff that we sort of learned as we went along. But I met Dom there, one of the other guys who we shared the workshop. Well, actually, two of the other guys who shared the workshop also went to that college. And we met Tim at a previous workshop share that we had, where he was working with a couple of the makers there. So we'd known each other for a couple of years before then as well. So
yeah. So we're all involved in setting up this workshop when we moved here, which was that about 15, 16 years ago?
Yeah.
So there's initially 6 of us sharing this workspace, and then the 3 of us joined forces off the back of that.
And we've slowly managed to persuade everyone else to leave. So it's just us and one other maker now in the workshop. So we've got quite a lot of space to ourselves.
Nice.
There'll be architects on this call nodding their heads, the sort of lessons of learning your craft, but not learning much about business as well. That's sort of, it's a bit of a perennial sort of gap in the training quite often, isn't it?
Yeah, so it's been a really interesting part of the journey, I think, for us. I think because you start very much with that kind of working on your own. And so we got together as 3 partners in a business, and we all carried on very steadfastly working on our own. And so you end up working slightly at cross purposes. You can overlap a lot on what you do together. And so it felt like we tried every different permutation of how to work together in the most kind of efficient way. And actually it wasn't until, I think it's about 3, possibly 4 years ago, that we started looking at mentoring, and then whether that would be a solution to help to kind of get us on the right course. And so we tried a couple of different mentors who weren't quite the right fit. And then we worked with a guy called Ben, who had a company called We Sort, and he just started having a conversation. He had a background in manufacturing. He knew a lot of what we were talking about. He understood a lot of the issues that we were coming across. And we just started to talk about how we could work more effectively together, and also how we could get more out of the projects that we were doing, because it felt like sometimes we were stretching ourselves very thin in terms of what we were doing. And so
there we go.
We can see.
Eventually.
Nice.
Got you. That first project that brought you together, gents, was that in terms of the scale of it? Obviously, you've come together, the 3 of you. You've worked on this project. Has that scale become more common, or does that still represent a pretty big project for you in your history?
It's still at the higher end of what we do. I mean, it's the kind of project that we know that we can handle quite effectively. I mean, that was about what, £1/3 of £1 million project in the end, like that, once it's all done. So, I mean, at that stage, it represented. I mean, our first year was mostly spent on that project across the whole team. And it allowed us to kind of draw together a bigger team than we'd had before, and it's really useful in terms of setting up ways of working together and running through a project like that. To have one focal point for it all was really ususeful. Yeah.
So it's just throwing yourself in the deep end at the first instance. You kind of
that was the thing. It's quite interesting because it was quite an outlier as a project, and so it feels like a lot of the work that we've done since has brought us back round to the last few years, getting back up to that sort of size project again, but having a much better process to be able to deal with them, or to be able to deal with them sequentially, or dealing with a couple of them at the same time. And so we really kind of learned a lot over the last few years on how to deal with that first project almost, because it was a fantastic project to work on, but it was very different from anything we've done before.
Yeah.
I mean, in terms of the kind of work it was, it's right in our comfort zone for the kind of things we do now. We did cover a lot of ground. I mean, we did kitchens and wardrobes. We did 2 or 3 staircases in there where we needed to kind of get specialist steel fabricators and things involved, and various other things. But it's like highly bespoke. Everywhere you looked, everything was really unique design wise. And so it kind of pushed us technically in terms of running that kind of project and getting the right other kind of collaborators involved. It was a good kind of introduction to the way we've been working ever since, really. And I think that's kind of where those are the kind of projects that really get us going, you know, where actually there's that challenge, and it's about just technically within our team, but also in terms of getting the right people involved from outside. I think they're really successful for us. So.
Yeah, it set some really nice precedents. I think it was working with a designer who was really enthusiastic and very collaboratively minded, but also working with a client who was incredibly enthusiastic about design and wanted to have, you know, whatever was made for him was going to be the very best that it could be, and so he wanted to get it right. And so I think that, and interestingly as well, you know, another nice part of it is, again, repeat clients. And so that client we've come back to, or has come back to us 3 or 4 times, and we've just actually finished a big project for him down on the river in the last month or so. And so it's really nice to create those relationships. So create a really nice team of people that you work with, but also doing work with clients who then just want to come back to you each time they have something interesting come up that they want to kind of look at again.
I suppose it's quite good that they can feel that they can come to you and ask for you to kind of step outside your comfort zone as well on some particular pieces, you know?
Yeah, and I think that in the work that we've done in kind of refining our process, because we've now set a lot more store in the kind of design phase of each project, and kind of really spending some time investigating and developing the design of the projects, it just means there's a lot more room then for conversations at the start with the client or with architects, designers, to actually really define exactly what it is that everyone's trying to get out of it, and then really just kind of hone in on the really key parts of the project. And so I think it really helps to set each project up kind of on rails almost. You know, you really get things started in the right way, and so you're not backtracking, you're not trying to kind of redevelop things as you're going along. Everything's set in that first part of work.
Is that the same for the architects you work with and the kind of end client homeowners you work with as well?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the process we work through, it's the same approach. Obviously, depending on the kind of information we've been presented with at the beginning of the project, it will affect how much of that work we're doing up front. I mean, sometimes it'll be a domestic client coming to us looking for concept design work. So going right from scratch, they might have some ideas, some reference images, but they're really looking for us to design their kitchen or wardrobes or whatever it is from scratch. Or probably more often now, it's a designer or architect coming to us with a full set of plans. And so the concept design work is done, and then it's about developing from that point on and making the kind of technical design work, and going through that process of sometimes managing how we get that to work within a budget, or it's just about trying to realize some very specific ideas around how something's going to look or how it's going to function. So
yeah, I mean, often each project that we do feels like you're kind of reinventing the wheel slightly each time, because there's always, on one hand, cabinet making is essentially making boxes, but on the other hand, there are an awful lot of, we're kind of pushed all the time in terms of finding kind of new techniques or new ways to kind of achieve what's been drawn. And I think that what's really important to us, and what seems to be developing with a lot of the architects we work with, is that sense of getting what's on the page into somebody's house. And so actually really faithfully reproducing a design and working out how we're going to do that without, you know, cutting corners or kind of compromising on the design of the pieces. And so I think that's become really important. And I think that's what drives us, is that sense of the importance of design. It felt like a long time ago, it felt like the best business model for a business like ours would probably be to design 3 kitchens and then knock them out 20 or 30 times a year. But it felt like that just didn't do it for any of us. You know, but for the 3 of us, we're really interested in doing something which keeps our minds keeps us ticking over, keeps our design chops kind of fresh. And so we want to do stuff that kind of pushes us, and there's complexity in it, and it's something which kind of really you can really get your teeth into, I think. And I think that's what drives us. And so it doesn't really matter how big the projects are either. You know, we did projects from a couple £100 up to the one we talked about at the very beginning. And I think it's about doing projects that are interesting, something which has a spark in it that really feels like it's going to make it an interesting thing to work on.
Yeah. So you're not just becoming another production line.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think that's kind of anathema. I think probably to us. It's nice every now and then because you don't have to think too much about it.
Yeah, we decided early on that we didn't want to specialise. We make bespoke furniture, but we didn't just want to make kitchens. All the live long day. And we probably made a lot more money if we'd have done that. But we decided that we wanted to do lots of different things because
sanity was more important.
Like Sam says, that's the more interesting. When someone comes to us with something that they're struggling to get made, or a lot of people have said no, then we'll look at that because we know how to unpick it. We've been doing it for a long time, and 3 heads are better than 1. And we've got a great team of makers who we get involved in all our projects. Very early on. But we should talk a little bit about how we work through our different phases and how that came about.
Yeah. And
so about maybe sort of 4 or 5 years ago, we were kind of like many businesses who've been going for 6-7 years. We kind of felt we were stagnating a little bit, and we felt our creative juices weren't sort of flowing, and we decided to get some outside input. So we started actively looking for someone to come in and look at our business and give us some feedback about what we were doing right, what we were doing wrong, what we should maybe try. And we tried a few different business mentors, and we worked with this. We settled on this chap called Ben from WeSort, and he's been working with us for the last 4 years, and he's completely changed how we look at our business and how we run our business and how we run the projects for our business through various phases. And he's given us, he's helped us to feel much more invigorated about what we do. I don't know if you want to talk about the phased approach a little bit, about how we do things.
Yeah. So I mean, as we talked about a little bit earlier on, we start each project. So if somebody came to us and had a kitchen project they wanted to do on their home, whether it be a client or an architect, we would take that whatever the initial drawings are, we pop around, have a visit, we take the initial information and come back with an estimate. So we'd put an estimate in on a kitchen. And then alongside that, we would then derive a fixed fee, which would be for the design phase. And that would be all about developing the design, doing site surveys, kind of liaising with main contractors if they're involved, just making sure that what we have is fully represents the design that's going to go in. Doing sampling, we do a lot of sampling. That's really key to what we do at the moment. It's to make really effective samples for what's going on in that project. And that's all done obviously kind of free of charge, the initial kind of proposal that we send out. And then from there, once the design phase is signed off, we would then go through and produce a set of fabrication drawings. So we have an in-house CAD designer, draftsman, and we produce a set of fabrication drawings that can then be signed off. And at the point that they're signed off, we issue a fixed price, and then we go into production. And we've also then organised the 3 of us to follow through the whole process as well. So I start off with all the kind of client-facing stuff. I would deal with all the initial proposals, meeting clients initially to talk about their projects. I prepare a proposal, send it off, and if that's then signed off into design, it gets handed over to Tim, who guides everything through the design process and through production. So he would be responsible for dealing with all the drawings, all the detailing, working with the architect and the client on making sure the detailing is kind of moving in the right direction, kind of doing what they need it to do.
Yeah.
And once we get to the point where a project is sitting in the workshop, ready to go out, taking up too much space, we then book in for installation, and that's where Dom comes in, and he manages everything to do with the client's experience of the installation in terms of what they can expect before we get there, what we need in order to kind of effectively work through the installation when we're there, and then dealing with sign-off at the end. So it just means that we have eyes on the process all the way through, which has been really useful for us, I think.
Yeah, I mean, go on.
So were those roles that were kind of assigned to you guys, or did you naturally just fit into those roles?
I was going to say, it hasn't always been that easy. We've all tried various permutations of various different things, but the roles that we currently have now they play to our natural strengths. Sam is very good with figures. He's a spreadsheet man. He kind of lives and breathes that kind of thing, and that's because he's
He comes from he used to work for Tower Records and music background, and his world was filled with spreadsheets, and so he understands that.
And the concept design stuff as well.
And the concept designs too.
Yeah. Sales end. It's sometimes it's about getting those initial ideas out there, isn't it?
It's always import back to envelopes, things like that.
It's not just spreadsheets.
No, it's not. It's not bad, but also he's got very good. He hates that part, but he's very good at it.
I love a
Another
spreadsheet.
thing is like
spreadsheet.
what I mean is that's it's a natural strength for you. And Tim is got a much more technical brain, so he runs the kind of the production side of things and the tweaking and how things get made, the way they get made. And I'm a more of a sort of practical doer sort of person, and I'm good with people. So I'm client facing, like Sam is at the other end, and I take care of installation. But that said, as Sam says, we all have a key sort of input in the design of the project. And one of the main things which we do is, because our roles are split, and sometimes we're not in the same place at the same time, especially over the last couple of years. We peer review each other's work. So when it gets to at the end of the design phase, we all check that proposal and have input before that goes out. We check the production proposal before that goes out. We all have input, and then we check the installation phase. And so we're always constantly checking each other, and that's really helps to keep the business nimble and to keep it.
I mean, it feels like that's
of course.
point for us. I mean, across all layers of the business, really. I mean, I've talked about how important is that sense of collaboration with the client, with the architects, with the contractor that we're working with, and then within the team, between the three of us, but with our whole team in the workshop. I mean, we deliberately got a fairly small team, but really high quality makers, and make sure that we're making the most of our collective experience and knowledge all the time. So in the design phase, I'll get different guys in from the workshop and just get them to look at drawings when they're in development. So we're just getting that sense that we're not kind of missing a trick really on kind of like that.
I suppose everyone looks at different things for different ways, don't they? So
Absolutely,
they can all put in.
And also, so everyone feels invested in it, so it's a bit more satisfying when it's going out into the workshop. Yeah,
and you guys must be really organised as well, because this is probably the most organised sample library I've ever seen. And we've been to most architecture practices as well.
Yeah,
I've seen it a few months ago.
We did change the layout of the workshop 2-3 years ago when we first started working with Ben, and we bought our office used to be outside the main body of the workshop in a kind of shipping container bolt on, and we brought it into the main body of the workshop, and it's in the corner with 2 huge windows that look out, just go back, and there you go. So it looks out into the workshop, and it means that we're much more kind of attached to, connected to what's going on.
And I think going back to that point again of being a college, and that thing of having a practical grounding in what we do, and having initially coming to this, I mean, at the heart of it all, three of us are still makers. We wear lots of different hats. And I think we, constantly bemoan the fact that we are in an office rather than actually making things. But I think that's a necessity, which means that there is a very kind of level conversation across the team. The guys who are out there making stuff for us know that we make as well. And so I think it means that there are fewer leaps that people need to make in order to work out kind of where we're coming from on what's being asked and that sort of thing. So I think it makes makes it quite a seamless operation, and it does feel like after a lot of kind of quite chaotic times, we've come to quite a period of stability in terms of what we do, and it feels like there's a really kind of natural kind of line that goes through the business now, taking us from start to finish, which is really nice to get to, I think.
Nice. I think we've lost Chris there. So what projects are you taking us through to today then?
Yes, the first one's job we did, Regis Park Road. We were initially brought in by the main contractor, and they was it Signet Star? They found us.
Yeah, they were looking for somebody. They had used the cabin maker, I think, for a while, and were looking for somebody. I think they were retiring or moving out of London, and so they were looking for somebody else to kind of take on some of the projects that they worked on. and had kind of, I think, had scoped us out on Instagram and things like that previously. And so he had kind of got in touch with me, asked if he could come down with the architects initially, just have a conversation, and kind of went from there, really. I mean, I think it's one of those projects where we made up some pretty extensive samples of the detailing on these doors that you see on the shared screen at the moment, which was really kind of pivotal for the client. And I think it really won. It was a massively useful exercise because it really won the client over, and it really kind of showed some of what we were, what we were capable of. And so it means that sampling has become kind of ever more important in what we do. I think
it's a really important part of the design phase. Yeah, because a lot of clients as well, although they have a very strong idea of how they want things to look in terms of finishes and a physical object. It's really important that they can see something, touch it, feel it, and know that that's what they're going to get. And that is, we found that out the hard way, but that is a really good, process to go through.
Yeah, but on a project like this, you've got some, like we had some technical challenges in terms of moving from the initial concept design from the architect. So with the kind of fluted oak detailing on the doors, actually, I mean, you can't just make a solid oak door without allowing for the fact that things are going to move, it's kind of seasonal expansion and contraction of timber and things like that. So we had to build in some tolerance within there, but make that something that was going to work aesthetically as well. So through sampling it, it's a much easier way to explain those details to a client, to say, okay, these are the things we're going to need to do to make it work technically, but actually this is how it's going to look and this is how it's going to feel. And after a couple of iterations of that, it kind of settled on something that everyone was really happy with.
I suppose you're in a rare position where you're not just convincing the client, are you? You're convincing the contractor, you're convincing the architect as well. So you need to use as many tools as you can at your disposal.
Yeah, and it also gives us a really strong platform to move on with the project as well. Things are really well established from a very early stage again, and kind of everyone knows where they are. And so I think we kind of, as I guess one of the things we have learned is the whole, making assumptions about anything in business or in any part of life is such a mistake. And so the more we can nail stuff down and get stuff agreed, and physically agreed on something which is tangible, I think it's kind of just helps everybody out.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's about delivering that certainty, isn't it? You go and buy a car and you know exactly what, you can take it for a test drive, you can kick the tires. But when it comes to, design of this bespoke nature, you're trying to make people as certain of the end result as you can, aren't you?
Yeah, absolutely. Give them the confidence that what's going to follow is going to be, again, exactly what they had expected to happen.
So the wardrobes on this project were, again, from a kind of technical point of view, that they were quite a challenge, but also it's a really good example of how that kind of collaboration in this case with the main contractor can work really well. And if everyone's kind of invested in working together to get these details to work, I mean, this one in particular is going into such a complex space, but the client was really particular around having everything parallel, having the roof light lining through, being an equal width from the cabinets on either side of the space. The wardrobes followed around and created the pocket doorway into the room, which the contractor was taking care of. And so it ended up being a kind of back and forth through our design phase, going to site, doing initial surveys, feeding back to the client contractor saying, well, this is what we found. If for this to work, then then end up kind of moving roof lights and things to work with how the cabinets are going to work out, and then we're kind of setting up datums for them to work back from with their work, and it worked really, really well in this case because the contractor was really good and really on board with that. But that's the kind of relationship that we're always really looking for.
Yeah, it's about building those type of relationships, and we've since worked with Signal again, and that was the start of a very kind of like fruitful relationship. And they understand where we're coming from, how we like to run our work, and how our process works, and it's a good fit. And we ended up doing through this project, and we're still doing. This project ran for over a couple of years, and we worked with the clients directly on some of the pieces, some of the more bespoke pieces, didn't we?
Yes.
This is some, yeah. So we've done work throughout the house now. We started off. The initial project was the upper 2 floors of the house, and they came back. Was it about a year and a half, a couple of years later, that because they were doing much more extensive work in the lower floors, and so they got us back in, and we ended up doing some freestanding furniture there as well. So in the previous slide, there's some alcove units that we made, which are freestanding with kind of gloss gold sprayed doors and bespoke handles and leg frames and things, and this avid cabinet. That's one you designed, wasn't it, Sam? That one?
Yeah.
It's,
Yeah, no, the client was back at the beginning of his career. He was an engineer, trained as an engineer, and so as a kind of a fun thing, kind of made the leg frame a bit like a sort of inverted suspension bridge, and so he really found that very pleasing as a kind of little design detail. And then with the veneer, it was really nice to. Well, I went with the clients down to veneerers down in East London. We spent a few hours down there just looking through their veneer stock, and so it's really nice to kind of create that kind of relationship with the client where they can see. It's always fascinating to see how those different industries work, but also they felt like, you know, it was kind of really looking after what they were looking for. You know, we were really trying to get to the bottom of what they were looking for, and so the white ebony was this tiny little bundle that was at the top of a pack, and you know, kind of dug it out and found it. And we went through a lot of kind of the veneerers who worked in it, did an amazing job. We had a lot of chat about how it was going to be laid out, and it wasn't quite as they would usually work with veneer. So we kind of pushed things to kind of make them work as we wanted them to. So we ended up going down to our veneerers down on the south coast, and so went down there to have a chat with them. But in the end, what we get is just an amazing piece of furniture, which is just really pleasing. It's a great thing to make, really nice thing to design, and clients love it. So
it's about a really open conversation, with the clients, and what they actually want, and how we can facilitate that. Not saying, well, this is what you can have, and you can have variations of this. It's really getting into the bottom, digging down and finding out what they want, and then it's for us to try and facilitate that and use our expertise along the way of how that can actually be made. So yeah, no, it's a good works well.
And this, I mean, so the leg frame was made by a company called Contour, based in High Wycombe. So they'd helped a lot in terms of kind of technical working out. I mean, it ended up being very faithfully representing the concept design that Sam had come up with, but there's some kind of technicalities there where we needed their input. But it all ended up on our CAD drawings, and so again, from the client's point of view, they were able to see that fully represented before anything was started. But yeah, the sprayers as well, Siteworks we used down in South London, and they did an amazing job on this, the kind of high gloss resin finish on that. So
I suppose that's the good thing about being in London and having all of these, craftsmen and skilled workers still here in the capital. You can kind of pop along to their studio or their workshop and kind of be there on site to kind of see how things are done and comment on these things and help to work together to get the best result.
Build up those relationships over time. You know who are the people that you can trust to do the things you need, and just having those options available. And that kind of exactly that thing. It's a conversation you can have with someone else, getting their expertise on something.
Yeah, we've got a nice, well-organised workshop, but it is, we're limited, with how much space we've got, and there's certain things which we can't do ourselves, or we don't have the space to do ourselves, and we've spent a long time over many years cultivating, relationships with other makers and other fabricators who do what they do really, really well, and they complement us, and that's a good relationship.
Well, I think people would also be amazed at kind of how much kind of small level fabrication goes on in London. There are so many pockets of makers doing various different, working in lots of different materials, and it's just that there's a wealth of them available for us to pick up on. We use an amazing wood turners up in Walthamstow who have been going since the 40s, and looks like, you know, the wood shavings on the floor have been there since the 40s as well. I mean, it's just like a rabbit warren of a workshop, and it almost looks like everything kind of pumping the lathes with their feet or something. But it's just, but they produce amazing work.
Yeah.
So if we need something really highly specced and turned from us, we know exactly where to go, and then they will do exactly what we ask them to do. You know, so it's a really nice position to be in, and I think we're very fortunate to be in London for that reason.
Nice.
Oh, this is a project.
There's another project that we're going to look at, which is this is actually a commercial project, but it's for some clients that we worked with previously. I mean, they had quite a small setup in an archway in Hackney, and we'd help them just create a little retail space from there, from the kind of front of the house that they opened on a Saturday. And then they decided after lockdown, when a lot of their work dried up, they decided to move fully into retail and set up this amazing space just near the canal by London Fields. And they'd got, they're kind of straight off asked us to get involved again. And the conversation, this one was, they had some clear ideas around some specific things they wanted, but the budget was much tighter. And so the design work we worked through on this ended up being a lot more focused on how we could get the best out of the design from an aesthetic point of view, but trying to keep the budget as tight as possible. And so it's nice. There's quite a lot of things we reused from the old place. So
yeah, they wanted to
even down to like a single tap, and a lot of the shelving you see around the back was reusing worktops that we'd set up in the previous space. And then the concrete worktops we ended up casting ourselves in the workshop.
Yes, love it.
Is that a long life dream, to be casting your own concrete on projects?
No, it's a lot of fun.
It's something we keep coming back to. It's
Pretty messy, but it's good fun.
In a few sunny days.
And how was the leap going from kind of the residential through to kind of the commercial side of things?
Kind of approached it in the same way, didn't we, really?
Yeah, I mean, I think it plays into that initial, idea that we had of kind of doing as much that's as different as possible as interesting. And so, as I think Tim said, we don't do a lot of commercial, but kind of mixing it in from time to time just adds a completely different dynamic.
Yeah, maybe 20%.
Yeah, there's definitely a different way of working. You tend to be different relationships on site, and so it just makes for another interesting experience. And I think again, with a client who's really focused on design and who we have a history of working with, I think it makes it into a really possible to make it into a really pleasing experience for everyone involved. And so as it proves in this one.
Yeah, but I mean, most commercial projects that we've done have come through a kind of a personal or a residential connection, who we've worked with them individually, or they know our work from someone else. It's not we don't tout for corporate or commercial work. It's good collaboration, and if it works within the process, then we take it on.
I suppose if you're working for a business owner who is fully invested in this, this small business themselves, it is like designing their own home. It's their baby, and you're going to form that same relationship.
And we are now actually, in design for some work in their home. So it's kind of gone full circle.
Yeah, but there's, I think, with going through the design phase on a project like this, as you work through the drawings and you're able to come up with a revision, something that's, again, you kind of, this kind of iterative approach where you're going back and forth with designs, but we're able to say, okay, this is our working drawings now, this is exactly how much this is going to cost based on this version. And then in this case, the revisions we went back and forth with were, okay, well, that's still not going to work with the budget, so what things in terms of materials or detailing can we refine? And so working through it that way, we managed to come up with something that was satisfying all round. And then we went ahead and made it.
No stone was left unturned.
I think one of the magic tricks on this project, guys, is that you talk about this being a tight budget, but there's nothing about this project that looks like you've had to compromise in terms of budget. How do you achieve that?
Well, I think it helps that we had clients who had a very strong vision about what they wanted, so they're very decisive and were able to quickly kind of take the road we needed to take with them. And so they were, if Tim came back to them with suggestions, they could work through those very quickly in terms of what they wanted and not. And I think that, and also, you know, I think we were able to strip back quite a lot from the initial idea.
Yeah.
And so there was quite a lot of space for us to kind of make changes without affecting the kind of the overall kind of that elevation of the sort of the bar there.
Yeah, I think it's taking the key things that are going to make the biggest difference. So the shelving and that worktop at the front really became major focal points for them. Just the aesthetic of having those in the space, and they do make a huge difference actually. If they'd been swapped out, then it would have really sacrificed quite a lot. I think. I mean, they also just worked really hard. I mean, they put everything into it. They did all the painting themselves.
So their hands on
lots of the fixtures and fittings themselves. So I mean, it's partly just down to their kind of
vision,
yeah,
dedication.
They
Sounds like a dream client to me.
It's a family business, and they were just all there, kind of painting away through the weekends and getting it to work. But yeah, it turned out really nicely. It's a good one.
And I think there's also a decision as well from their point of view that it's a new enterprise for them. There's kind of stress involved in that, and so what they wanted to do was to get up and running, get start selling things. And so I think there's an element of there's a possible phase 2 to come back to. We want to see how things go, suck it and see how the business develops, and then we can come back. And so I think that's part of what they did, was just to kind of, for themselves, split it into kind of phases, that what was absolutely necessary now and what could wait until later on.
Yeah. Brilliant. No, it's a lovely space.
Cool.
Nice
breath.
Are you guys always popping in to see how it's standing the test of time, or?
Yeah, it's local, isn't it? I mean, when I'm sort of like going to and from sites, it's a nice little stop. Pop in and say hi.
How could you resist?
Yeah.
That's the end of the slide, isn't it?
Yeah.
Is that all of them?
That's
Great.
the end of our solution.
Have you got any questions, Chris?
No, I think we've got everything covered there from me. Thank you, Dean.
Let's
Anything
see
from our audience?
No, they've been very quiet today. If everyone's got any Q&As or burning questions, just let us know. Pop them in the chat.
I think we've talked everybody into submission.
We're doing good for time, actually. We're doing good for time. It's fine.
Yeah.
No, I think everyone's being super shy. But yeah, thank you guys so much for taking the time to speak to us. It's not our usual conversation, but it's great to hear how you guys work and what you've got going on. Oh, we got one. Here we go. Michael Smart, is he a friend of yours? No. How have you dealt with material price increases and client budgets over the past year or two?
Well, it's been a challenge. I think that because we work within this sort of design phase and phased approach, the initial pricing is generally an estimate, and I think it's about being much more transparent about the fact that materials costs are incredibly febrile at the moment, and so things are changing all the time. And so I think to a certain extent, it's having that conversation about this is what materials are, where materials are at right now. But there is an acknowledgement that we'll have to revisit those at the point at which we actually sign off and order materials. There may be an uplift, but just to keep that conversation going. And also, I think from our point of view, it's about developing options to say, well, for instance, 4 or 5 months ago, the price of plywood became kind of incredibly difficult to kind of justify.
Yeah.
And then it's about what are the options? What can we suggest as an alternative, which will maintain the aesthetic, will give a slightly different twist on something. And so it's about, I guess that's our responsibility, is to kind of give as much latitude for decision making as possible.
Yeah. I guess that's just added to the timeline more than anything.
Yeah, I mean, I think the turnaround, it feels like lots of distributors have gone from that kind of just-in-time distribution model to who knows when. I mean, a lot of things like appliances for kitchens, we would be expecting to be on a sort of 3 or 4 day turnaround max, and we've had kitchens kind of in the last year or so where appliances have taken 3, 4, 5 months to arrive, and so it's been that has made things quite difficult, because usually we can key our program in with the main contractor. If somebody's doing a kind of refurb on a house, which might take 6 or 7 months, then we know that we have enough time to do what we need to do within that. Find ourselves pushed beyond the end of some contracts because of the fact that suppliers, it can be so difficult. But again, I think it's about researching alternatives as well, and a lot of the people who we use are kind of realise that, and so they'll say, well, we haven't got this, but this is what we could suggest as an alternative. And so I think it's just going back to the client and keeping that conversation going.
Yeah, and also that, I mean, that's one of our advantages. Because we don't just specialise in making furniture out of one material. We don't just make things out of birch ply or just make things out of veneer. We can offer alternatives all the time. That's been really useful for us.
Yeah, but prices are definitely going up. So protecting clients from that, it's very difficult to. I mean, I think it's about, as Sam said, it's about making sure that there's that expectation and that's anticipated as much as possible. But
good communication is key.
If blowing prices jump by 100% within a couple of months, which they did do in the springtime, then we just have to try and keep up with that and make people understand as we're going along. So, I mean, it's stabilised a bit now, but at that time when things were really all over the place, then it was about trying to make sure that we're pushing to get things signed off as quickly as possible. Just flagging up with the client that if they say yes now, then we can get the materials ordered and we can make sure that the price isn't going to change again. And so it's just keeping an eye on that and making sure that they're aware of that context all the time.
Nice. All right, I think that's it for questions, guys. Thanks very much. It's been really great.
Thank you very much, guys.
Thanks for joining us. And if anyone wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way?
Our website.
Come and see us.
Come see us at the website, or
cycle on by.
Or on Instagram. Yes, regularly weekly updates of what's going on.
Instagram is probably our most what we keep updated with all the stuff that's happening kind of constantly. And so Dom usually puts up a post kind of every week, and it's usually kind of where we're at, the projects we're working on currently, and we receive messages over Instagram so we can respond to those as well. Yeah, give us a call, come and see us, show you around.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, guys. Thanks everyone for tuning in, really appreciate it. Again, if you've got any questions, just follow Constructive and Co on Instagram, get in touch with them. They're more than happy to chat. And we have one more left, don't we, Chris? Next week
we do.
We've got Studio Hagen Hall on Tuesday. Yes, Tuesday. Tuesday. So if you're not signed up, sign up and join us again for another chat. Thanks very much, guys. Have a great evening.
Thanks for joining.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.